Hey guys, I'm here to get into a few of my favorite albums throughout the decades of ranging from the 1980s to the 2000s. So that's just what Talking Heads makes me feel like. It just kind of feels like a celebration of just my love for music from the 80s to the 2000s. So I'll just geek out for a little bit with all this. And I'd say um, one of my all-time favorite albums is "The Dreaming" by Kate Bush, which was released in 1982. That's just a really uniquely kind of perfect foundation of just art pop at its maximum kind of display. Just kind of drawing all kinds of like just intense influence. It feels a lot like a Miles Davis kind of influence, but Hurt's version of all of that, like with Bitches Brew era particularly. I just really love how melodic this album is. It feels very catchy. It feels very offbeat. Every single song on this album is just has a real mesmerizing midnight kind of atmosphere about it. Just really subtle arrangements. Sounds very forward thinking and futuristic, like out of this time practically. And how good it is. It's just one of the greatest albums I've ever heard. And then that goes right along with Murmur by RAM, which was released in 1983. I think every single song on that album is just absolute perfection to an original extent. It feels like every song just kind of has its place as a very timeless, soulful kind of foundation in every sense of the word. And it's been very consistent since first discovering this album. That was right back when I was about 16. I just discovered the film Magnolia. I watched it all for the first time and just been mesmerized. And I made a trip down to Georgia and we were just listening to this album on the way down there to Athens, Georgia. And I was just like, wow, this is a, a mesmerizing one from start to finish. It feels like one of the most subtly life-affirmingly influential albums ever made. It's so re-listenable, one of the most re-listened albums ever. It really just never loses its power, and just it's perfect. It's perfect from start to finish. Um, then you have Purple Rain by Prince in 1984. That's a life kind of affirming, sort of life changing album all throughout. Always has been since seeing. I saw this in theaters at a mall when I was growing up, and I've always kind of returned to this album. It's just one of the most subtly influential ones, and it just feels like it's just ahead of its time. I feel like just now, it just refers to itself as one of the best kind of jam out albums where every song is just melodic perfectionism. And one thing as a bassist, I always get funny with his Prince is like he's not, obviously doesn't like this album, especially doesn't really feel like there's much of a bass or it's very synth oriented rather than bass, but equally melodic and just mesmerizing with guitar playing. I mean, just the arrangements. This is a perfect album from start to finish as well as Reckoning by REM, which they did that in 1984 as an equally mesmerizing follow-up to Murmur. I love this album every bit as much. It sounds a little bit more of like has a little bit more of an urban kind of flair about it. While Murmur sounds more of a countryside. I'd say Reckoning's equally perfect in all their songs and just getting across energy, a very original kind of energy that's very distinctive to REM, and it feels like it's an energy that really sets it off like a very 1990s kind of wavelength and kind of emotion all throughout. It's absolutely perfect from start to finish. Then you have Hounds of Love, which is like Kate Bush in the year 1985. That's just 12 songs of just absolute perfection. It kind of feels like this is Bush's just take on just her own ambitious epic. It's like The Dreaming was like her kind of traveling the world, kind of going a little insane, and then this is kind of her just taking it all back home. Well, yeah, like that one's more experimental. But Miles Davis, this was more like a Beatles-esque kind of album. And David Bowie, very David Bowie, in pacing, especially by the way of the album Low, where it's like you have the first half, it's just kind of like a bunch of pop, melodic sort of pop out songs, and then turns into more of an experimental kind of way. And it's like a story. It feels very cinematic. It feels like Bush has watched a lot of films, and you can really sense the energy living all throughout this album. And it's one of those. I was obsessed with Kate Bush all throughout the range of 2014, 2015, especially, and that was enough to study it. And I think a lot of that influence just holds up. It's just mesmerizing, timeless. And that's just kind of her just grand album in every sense of the word. Certainly her most inviting one, I think, in every sense, and just very timelessly listenable. And you have Rain Dogs, which is by Tom Waits, made in the year 1985. Now that's just a groundbreaking, poetic sort of album, which feels like it's like Waits is like quite literally like the continuing evolution of guys like Bob Dylan, Neil Young, where it kind of feels like the lyrics are perfectionism, and there's a loose quality that's original about Waits, and he's the kind of guy who just communicates an essence of finding glory, then just continually evolving into weirder shades as it goes. And that's just about the most timelessly influential kind of statement I've ever heard. This album feels loose to an original extent, and all this just strikes as just all-time favorite from start to finish. It's just mesmerizing. And it continues to get better with age. Like, it was one I listened to a lot growing up, and I was always intrigued by it sort of just offbeat sort of way, and it just sincerely gets better as it goes. And then you have in the 1990s, best albums there would be I love the album In Utero by Nirvana, which was made in the year 1993. It's one of the most haunting, kind of disturbing sort of albums I've heard. I was obsessed with this album growing up in my youth, and I was always uniquely disturbed by it. I feel like I've returned back to Nirvana with age, and I feel like I love them more than ever before. Really, like I think that the influence of this album is kind of an ultimate raw statement of just kind of wanting to be a lot more of an. It feels like an ultimate revelation of an antisocial mood that does contrast greatly from Nevermind. You can just feel a lot of the pressure, being expressed in a lot of this album. Yeah, it's uniquely haunting, and it uniquely just kind of has a way of timelessly getting into the world subconscious. Like there's just nothing like it. Yeah, it feels like that kind of evolved, and I feel like the rest of the '90s, you feel like In Utero just made such a loud statement that it's like it sort of evolved to Hex and Grace. I want to talk about Grace by Jeff Buckley, or Crooked Rain, really. Crooked Rain in the year 1994. This is by the band Pavement, and this was hold on, was one of the greatest albums I've ever heard in my life. It's a perfect guitar oriented album, and kind of just perfectly reflects on the statement of like the journey I've worked throughout the musical progression. It was like kind of the perfect statement of just kind of like having a lot of that grunge aesthetic and influence, and then just not ever wanting to take it too far into like I don't know, like a dark. And this was like a lighter shade in a lot of ways, but the way this is expressed is just human. It's like the guitar chords are just absolutely perfect, and all this just holds up as mesmerizing, timeless. I'll never forget like learning a lot of these Pavement songs back when I was like 20, 21 and on guitar. And now it's just like this all just kind of continuously evolves with age. And I love all the deep cuts on this album. Like this whole thing is just such an album. And what's funny is I've only listened to this and Slaving on Chatting. I've never listened to the stuff they did in the mid to late '90s, which is really I'm really fascinated by this. I think I've just wanted to wait for the right time, right place. And then you have Grace by Jeff Buckley, which is released in the year 1994 as well. And Grace is just an original statement. I'll never forget listening to this when I was like 2021, and this is just the most powerful, groundbreaking, mesmerizing, beautiful album I've ever heard in my life. And funny because it feels like very like powerful, but it has a very like subtle way about itself. It's just so original in expressionism. Absolutely just love going back to all these songs and just feeling their power and the simplicity of getting across so many intense emotions, you could say. Like all these songs are just quite mesmerizing. And then you have Hex, which is by Bark Psychosis, released in 1994. And I consider this a comfort album. I discovered this, I would say, like during a gloomy phase around like the year 2013, and this just really holds up to me. It's just a real like laid back sort of sound. I've had a lot of recent memories of like camping out and stargazing to this album, and it really is just like 100% a perfect stargazing album, all in every sense of the word, all throughout. And then you have I Can Hear the Heart Beating It's One, which is released in the year 1997 by Yo La Tengo. This is, I think, one of the last just truly mesmerizing, groundbreaking guitar albums I've ever heard. I feels like everything put into this is just really on a uniquely perfect level. It feels like it just there's a real ease about the album, and it feels like there's a comfort that just continuously gets better with age. This is one that really keeps revealing itself as just one of the most addicting to go back to. I feel Yo La Tengo's 90s run in general. There's just so many catchy songs they have, and it's just melodic. And just there's like almost a come down spirit of that album. That reminds me of like bands like I love like the National so much. It feels like it's maybe like someone who maybe had been in a chaotic mood, and there's like a point where you almost want the calm more. And I feel like these bands perfectly speak to that note. And this whole album really hits that just perfect. Then you have Gaseous Bujurin, which is released by Sigur Rós in 1999. They were just this is a uniquely floaty album. It just feels like every song is just so beautiful, and it also feels very stargazy. I mean, a lot of this is kind of meant to just kind of drift off and just kind of get lost into this like very atmospheric, very epic sort of soundscape. Every sense of the word, this is just one of the most perfect things I've ever heard. And then American Football, which is American Football, released in the year 1999. This is when I go way back with growing up with this album, and just usually just has it retains its quality from start to finish with age. And I think it's just one of the most mesmerizing, sounds I've ever, most calming albums I've ever heard. I think the extent of peace, comfort, and just melancholy living in this album, it's enough to last a lifetime. This is one of the most magical, beautiful, transcendental albums ever made. Like, there's a lot of that shoegaze influence going into it, as well as you could just say just kind of a warmth about it. It just feels like it's a perfect statement of the late 1990s, and this is just one of the absolute greatest I've ever heard. So, and then we got to get to the 2000s. My favorites there are there definitely had to be Kid A by Radiohead, and that was 2000. That was just whenever Radiohead was really just turning it around, making it all dark and kind of like how Nirvana was doing it in Utero, in contrast to Nevermind. They were kind of, I think, OK Computer was kind of doing Your Nevermind, and then it's kind of was like in Utero, like they rebelled against and rejected everything, and kind of just made an ultimate statement of just a feeling of just maybe being on a dark, gloomy hike in the mountains at nighttime. That's what this album really feels like, being lost in the woods at night, the nightmarish forest atmosphere. It also reminds me a lot of like David Lynch kind of films. There's a David Lynchian kind of quality about this album. And this reveals itself as completely timeless from start to finish. Every single song on here is just mesmerizing. Groundbreaking, kind of rejecting even like a lot of heavy guitar use. Like most songs are, it's more of electronica kind of based album, very ahead of its time. It sounds like it just could have been made today simply. Um, and you have Turn on the Bright Lights. That was by Interpol in the year 2002. That's just one of the perfect statements I've ever heard in my life. It kind of reminds me of like a contrast. I listened a lot with the album Stories from the City, Stories from the Sea by PJ Harvey. That was in 2000. Like they were both about very New York City based, and one was like kind of before the 2001, and this is like in 2002. So you kind of just get this sorrowful kind of atmosphere all throughout. But it's just always really compelled me. Of just it's like a hopeful kind of gloomy atmosphere, kind of post punk aesthetic, and just the way that the bass work especially just is very hypnotizing. This is just really one of my all time favorite albums, along with Yankee Foxtrot Hotel by Wilco, which is released in the year 2002. That's one of the greatest albums ever made. Every single song on that is just absolute melodic perfectionism, and it just perfectly also just kind of sounds like a maybe going on a hike on a day, just reflecting on having worked in like hotels and I'm just not like knowing people and things. It just this is an album that really reflects on memories and just a time and place for me that feels like an eternal one. And there's a simplicity about how it gets there. It's just that's a mesmerizing album. Then Velocity, Design, and Comfort. That was my Sweet Trip in 2003. That's just about those mesmerizing kind of. It's like a combination of Aphex Twin and My Bloody Valentine, where it feels like the songs are just very off the like real melodic structure. That feels like it's very experimental. Like a lot of it's very chaotic. It feels like a lot of random noise sometimes. So then it just adds up to this like melodic bliss that just kind of makes it all the energy just worth it to get to this momentous, epic, extraordinary moment. It just sounds like it's trying to replicate the feeling of going through the go through the Stargate, see what the film shows on Space Odyssey. It reminds you a lot of that. And then you have Yes, which is by Joanna Newsom in the year 2006. That is just one of the best. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Van Morrison, as if she possessed the soul of Van Morrison and brought that to the mid 2000s. The way Newsom gets all these 5 of these songs across are epic, and it just sounds like being in the mountains. And just kind of like I associate a lot of this with like epic, like spending all day out in the mountains, epic views along the way. It's an extraordinary, whimsical, mesmerizing, atmospheric sort of album from start to finish. All 5 of these songs stand out as original. Then you have In Rainbows by Radiohead. That's just best albums ever made. It's like kind of the album of my times. I've had hard times. I feel like I grew up listening to this obsessively. This is my favorite album of all time growing up. The most re-listened ever. I have so many fond memories of friends I share with. This is so timeless, and this is one that just continues to grow up with age, and that's just the way that all these 10 songs hit are just mesmerizing, powerful, and you feel like you're just kind of experiencing the cycles of almost just like a creative yet insane kind of personality all throughout, and all this is just really mesmerizing, and it contributes strongly to just the reasons of like I don't know, just a lot of film enthusiasm and passion. That's what it relates to a lot. I think Radiohead was very in tune with a lot of film madness feels and looks like in every sense of the word. They can just convey it sonically in ways that just remain transcendental. It's completely transcendental. And that's just geeking out about some favorite albums of music. And this is the right place to do it here. Yeah, this is one of my all-time favorite stuff right there.